Okay, we'll call this August 22nd meeting of the Board of Aldermen to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. State clerk, please do roll call.
Alderman Breeding.
Here.
Alderman Wallach.
Here.
Alderman Statter. Here. Alderman Charbonneau.
Here.
Alderman Maybe.
Here.
Alderman Miguel.
Here.
Alderman Anderson.
Here.
Alderman Kennedy.
Here.
All 8 are here. You have your quorum, Your Honor.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is presentations, communications, and appointments. We are to have a presentation tonight by the Missouri City Clerks Association. The lady is not here yet, so if please the board will delay that until she does arrive, and we'll proceed on. Okay, next item is public hearings. The first item on the agenda is an ordinance approving an amended site plan providing for a modification to the landscaping at Schnucks Supermarket Company located at 9540 Watson Road, City of Crestwood, Missouri. We will open the public hearing on that. Is there anybody here from Schnucks? Sir, would you please state your name and your store address for your address for the record, please?
My name is Jordan Wilkinson. I'm a landscape architect with DG2 Design, representing our client, the Desco Group. The address is 9540 Watson Road that we're speaking about. The Schnucks site is approximately 6.3 acres. If it's all right with you, I'm just going to give a quick overview of where we've been the past month with this process. Approximately 6.3 acres in the C1 commercial district. The net gross square footage of the building is over 68,000 square feet. Our client is currently investing in an interior renovation, which I'm sure you've noticed if you've been there, and they have the same goal to reflect this level of improvement outside as well. So we've been tasked with redesigning the parking lot to make it more successful. Excuse me. Full parking lot improvements will include a milling and overlay of the asphalt surface, as well as removal of all of the curbed landscape islands. If you're familiar with the parking lot, there's several very small landscape islands with either burnt up honey locusts or no honey locusts at all. It's really not an environment conducive to growing trees. There's not a lot of soil in those islands. So as our solution to that problem, we are removing approximately 14 parking spaces within the lot and propose to add an additional 2,237 square feet of new green space within those islands. Most of the islands in the parking lot will be essentially the size of 2 parking spots now. So there'll be a lot more soil volume in there. The biggest problem that they've been fighting is this heat island effect with, very little soil. The trees dry out, burn up. They've been replaced several times. As part of that, our planting plan will include an additional 29 new trees, as well as preservation of 9 existing trees on the site. All of the plant species are drought tolerant, native species for the most part. We went in front of planning and zoning, got their conditional approval for modification to the landscape plan. And then we went in front of Board of Adjustment last week and got their approval for the variance to the landscape code. The code requires an island every 100 feet, and we're doing that 140 feet roughly between them. So that's where we are today, in a nutshell.
These islands, will they be irrigated, or will they be utilized for stormwater runoff, like a rain garden?
They won't be utilized for stormwater runoff. They'll have a 6-inch concrete curb surrounding the entire island with no cuts or openings. They will not be irrigated with a permanent system, like a pop-up irrigation system. The client is going to utilize hose bibs, spigots on the building, or a landscape contractor to water with a water truck until everything's established. Being that it is, a drought-tolerant plant list and native tree species, we don't anticipate a huge need for permanent irrigation. So the plan is to, obviously keep everything watered until it's well established, and then they'll always have the opportunity in extreme drought conditions to water it manually as well.
Any questions from the board regarding this issue? I see no lights. Anyone from the public have any comments regarding this issue? Anyone on this side care to speak? Okay, see none. Anyone on this side care to speak? Okay, see no hands. When do you anticipate you will start this project?
This fall. One of the conditions from the Planning and Zoning Commission, I believe, was that the client hire a traffic engineer to get a parking study, which we're in the process of, so we need to wrap that up before we can get building permits, but I think our goal is October.
Okay. Give the time for planning. Okay. I see no further questions from the board. I see no further questions. Alderman Miguel?
I guess I'm just kind of wondering, why would we need or require a parking survey?
Because technically, the parking regulations right now require 7 spaces for every 1,000 square feet, which if you do the quick math, that would put us at needing 478 spaces, which isn't there anyway. Hasn't been, as far as I know, since the site was built. I think there's 314 currently, and we're reducing it even further to 298. So just to, follow the rules and make sure that we're still meeting the parking regulation requirements, we're going to have an engineer look at it. And I'm fully confident that he's going to say there's not really an issue with the parking volume at this location.
Would that be a minimal cost to you?
I'm not sure the cost exactly. I know engineers aren't cheap, but we're willing to do what it takes to get the project going.
I'm just wondering if this board could waive that requirement.
Was this a requirement of the planner?
It's a requirement of the city code.
I understand that.
I would talk to the city attorney prior to issuing any, any vacations from that rule in section 26-256. It would most likely require a variance. Section 26-237 is allowing the applicant, as Alderman Miguel said, the minimum cost most likely because companies like Desco and Schnucks keep engineers on staff or on retainer. So we're allowing them the option to explore that route versus paying a $500 filing fee and going for a variance. It's like apply for a variance.
That issue is coming up later on under public hearings. I'm just curious how you feel that'll, for the public, how you feel that will affect this request.
I personally don't feel that it affects the request at all. I mean, we know for a fact from previous requests and previous approvals that pretty much every shopping center that we have in the city of Crestwood does not meet the requirements of our parking code, which is why one of the amendments coming before the board tonight is an update to the parking code that brings our minimums and maximums, not maximums, but it brings our minimums into compliance with what other cities are doing and also ITE standards, which is International Traffic Engineers. So we have high parking standards and they're out of whack because they haven't been updated in a while, and so we want to fix that. And 237 right now is our only Band-Aid to address these issues.
Okay. Yeah, City Attorney?
In response to Mr. Jones' question, I think because the code as it is currently exists does provide for it, I would be somewhat concerned if the board waived it for this applicant when we're at this stage of the process and they've agreed to do it. But certainly it's always the board's choice to proceed in whatever manner it determines appropriate. But in this case, I think fixing it through the code amendment would be the preferable action from a legal standpoint.
Does your parking lot extend beyond the, I'm going to say the south side of your building into that area? That's
No.
in front of Gordon's?
No, the parcel kind of cuts through that drive that separates the two.
Okay. Has there been any discussion of maybe attempting to obtain some of the, their parking?
Not
Since
that
the
I know of.
building's not used?
No.
Okay. All right, anything else, Alderman McGill?
That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Alderman Maybe?
Appreciate your reinvestment in the community, and everything looks good to me. I was going to move for a first reading.
Okay. All right, do we have then a motion and a second for a first reading? We have a motion and a second.
That was the motion I made.
I'm sorry?
I guess it would be a motion to close the public hearing first. Thank you.
Okay, motion to close public hearing.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Okay,
Um,
now we have a motion for a first reading.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Bill number, please.
1736.
17-36. That's the time of the Olmsted. Olmsted, if you do the honors, please.
Certainly, Your Honor. Bill number 17-36, introduced by Alderman Statter. An ordinance approving an amended site plan providing for a modification to the landscaping at Schnucks Supermarket Company located at 9540 Watson Road, City of Crestwood, Missouri.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Stafford.
Yes.
Alderman Maybe.
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy.
Yes.
Alderman Breeding.
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau.
Yes.
Alderman Miguel.
Yes.
Alderman Anderson.
Yes.
Alderman Wallace.
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion has passed.
We have a motion and a second for a second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Alderman Charbonneau, would you do the honors, please?
Bill number 17-36, introduced by Alderman Statter. An ordinance approving an amended site plan providing for a modification to the landscaping at Schnucks Supermarket Company located at 9540 Watson Road, City of Crestwood, Missouri.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Wallace.
Yes.
Alderman Anderson.
Yes.
Alderman Maybe.
Yes.
Alderman Stafford. Yes. Alderman Breeding.
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy.
Yes.
Alderman Miguel.
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau.
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion has passed.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. And yes, I have been in the Schnucks store. It looks great. And, my wife was a retired employee from that store. Was really amazed at how good a stayed down while she was still working. Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay, if the board would not mind at this time, I'd like to go back to the presentation, communication, appointments, presentation by the Missouri City Clerks Association. Do we have any objections? No? Okay.
Thank you so much.
Please, you
I
would?
do apologize for my tardiness, but I appreciate you all allowing me to come before you. It's called Murphy's Law. When you try to make a good impression and you're early, something happens and it makes you late. So I do appreciate you all letting me come.
Could you just state your name for the record?
My name is Deanna Jones. I'm the
Okay.
city clerk for the city of Berkeley.
Okay?
This is Jody Snyder. She's the city clerk for the city of Troy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We're here on behalf of Missouri City Clerks and Finance Officers Association, state level as well as Eastern Division, to honor your clerk, Ms. Helen, for her receiving her MRCC and her CMC certifications through IMC and Missouri City Clerks Association. We would like to thank you all for your dedication, for allowing Ms. Helen to continue to strive for higher education, because we know that all the rules and regulations that are changing, they're not only to benefit her, they're to benefit you, as well as other city staff, as well as your residents. And so today we're here just to say we congratulate you for receiving your next goal in your step of many achievements from the Eastern Division as well as the state level of the MOCC. Thank you. Mayor, would you like to come down?
I'm sorry? Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I think the important thing to mention here is that Helen has worked very hard as a city clerk to obtain the certification. It's not easy. It takes a lot of credit hours, like going to college. And she's worked at it very hard, and we certainly support her, as we do all employees that look to better themselves. So thank you very much. You're a tremendous asset to our city, and you do a fine job.
And I want to thank you and the board and Chris for supporting me through this journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. We will get back now to our public hearings. We thank you ladies very much for coming out.
Thank you.
Next item under public hearings is an ordinance approving a boundary adjustment plat for 9353 Watson Industrial Park, City of Crestwood, Missouri, for the construction of the new Crestwood Department of Public Works facility. We will open the public hearing on this. Any members of the board have any questions or comments? I see no lights, so I will ask the public. Where'd it go? Anyone on this side have any comments regarding this issue? I see no hands. Anyone on this side have any comments on the issue? I see no hands. Okay, so I'll ask the board then for a motion and a second. Close the public hearing. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. May I have a motion and a second for a first reading, please? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Bill number, please.
1737.
Alderman Miguel, would you do the honors, please?
Bill number number 17-37, introduced by Alderman Miguel. An ordinance approving a boundary adjustment plat for 9353 Watson Industrial Park, City of Crestwood, Missouri, for the construction of the new Crestwood Department of Public Works facility.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Charbonneau,
Yes.
Alderman Wallach,
Yes.
Alderman Miguel,
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy,
Yes.
Alderman Statter. Yes. Alderman Breeding,
Yes.
Alderman Maybe,
Yes.
Alderman Anderson.
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion has passed.
Okay. Do I have a motion and a second for a second reading?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Alderman Maybe, would you do the honor, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Pardon me. Bill number 1737, introduced by Alderman Miguel. An ordinance approving a boundary adjustment plat for 9353 Watson Industrial Park, City of Crestwood, Missouri, for the construction of the new Crestwood Department of Public Works facility.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Kennedy,
Yes.
Alderman Maybe,
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau,
Yes.
Alderman Wallach,
Yes.
Alderman Anderson,
Yes.
Alderman Miguel,
Yes.
Alderman Statter. Yes. Alderman Reed.
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion has passed.
Okay. The next public hearing is a public hearing, an ordinance amending chapters 22 and 26 of the municipal code of the City of Crestwood, Missouri to eliminate the sign commission and transfer all existing duties of the sign commission to the Planning, Zoning, and Architectural Review Commission. Do we have any questions from the board? I see no lights. Anyone in the audience care to address this issue? Either one of the two of you? Okay. See no hands? So I will ask the board for a motion and a second to close this public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Okay. Have a motion and a second for a first reading.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. May I have a bill number, please?
1738.
Yes, I down to Alderman Wallach and then to read, please. When you're ready, Alderman Wallach, please.
Bill number 17-38, introduced by Alderman Wallach. An ordinance amending chapters 22 and 26 of the municipal code of the City of Crestwood, Missouri, to eliminate the sign commission and transfer all existing duties of the sign commission to the Planning and Zoning and Architectural Review Commission.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Maybe,
Yes.
Alderman Breeding,
Yes.
Alderman Anderson,
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau,
Yes.
Alderman Miguel,
Yes.
Alderman Wallach,
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy,
Yes.
Alderman Statter.
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion has passed.
We have a motion and a second for a second reading.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Alderman Brady, would you do the honors, please?
Thank you. Bill number 1738, introduced by Alderman Wallach. An ordinance amending chapters 22 and 26 of the municipal code of the City of Crestwood, Missouri to eliminate the sign commission and transfer all existing duties of the sign commission to the Planning, Zoning, and Architectural Review Commission.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Kennedy,
Yes.
Alderman Miguel,
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau,
Yes.
Alderman Wallach,
Yes.
Alderman Anderson,
Yes.
Alderman Maybe,
Yes.
Alderman Statter. Yes. Alderman Reed.
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion has passed.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is another public hearing. This is a public hearing on an ordinance amending Chapter 26, Article 4 of the Municipal Code of the City of Crestwood, Missouri, to amend Section 26-186 relating to accessory buildings and structures. Any members of the board have any comments? Alderman Anderson?
Thank you, Your Honor. The language of the proposed ordinance that we would consider in relation to this matter lists several different types of accessory structures or things, and And so I'm wondering if we might also add in there something having to do with nets, soccer nets or goals or something along those lines. I know we have batting cages and so forth. I recently was actually in Kirkwood, and someone had a giant soccer net in their front yard, and I thought it was rather bizarre. So I'm wondering if you know, we've got sort of a comprehensive list, and maybe that might be appropriate to add. Also, in the language, it says that these items will not be erected or placed in any, and the language is any required front or side yard. And I'm just wondering, is that a term of art, the required? Is there some purpose for that, or could we just strike that? And then I'm also wondering whether in the next section when it talks about fastened, anchored, or fixed, I'm not sure how we would fasten something to the ground, but I suppose it's possible. But I would want to see the word securely in there. If I'm thinking about it some, you know, you could have something affixed or anchored, but just for a temporary situation. So I think the intent here is something that's been there a long time, of more or less permanent nature, and so I would say if it's been securely anchored or affixed, that would give me more confidence that it's something that that should be grandfathered in. Those are my comments.
Okay. Alderman Sharpton, you're next.
One of the questions I did have would be, for instance, it mentions bounce houses. You know, it's become something that popular at birthday parties or something to that effect. Would that be allowed because it's not permanent? Just want to make sure that that's clear, that we will allow if someone's having a playhouse birthday party bash or for the upcoming night out too. If somebody would rent something like that, that it would be accepted.
From my standpoint, and I'll look to Mr. Gillum, but it would be prohibited.
That's how I was taking it, and I was wanting to know if it come open to suggestions, but you know, ways that when I realized if we make it, you know, say non-permanent item, somebody could maybe have a non-permanent item in their yard for about 3 years, but you know, I think that would come down to code enforcement. But I would be open to modifying it if we all want to have a discussion about that.
Could we permit that? Temporary?
That was one idea I was
I don't know if
thinking
we want
about.
to add yet another permit to our list.
Well, I don't know if it would require a payment other. I mean, if it's for a birthday party and you know, it's going to last for 3 hours and then you're going to take it down and remove it.
It's less the payment function and more just the administrative burden of something that's so fleeting. You're going to have it up for what, 24 hours?
Okay. Yeah.
I'd say that if you know, if this is the direction the board wants to go, I'd encourage coming up with some language allowing temporary structures and establishing a time limit. And you know, if this ordinance is well enough known, the neighbors will sort of self-enforce. They'll call code enforcement. This has been up there for a week, and then we'll come out and deal with it that way.
The only other question I had, Your Honor, it would be where did we come up with the boundary level for per feet? I just want to, is that what we're seeing across the board from other municipalities or some less? I just wanted to raise that question. I don't know if Alderman Anderson, Mr. Jones, somebody would have any information on that.
I think as I understand it, the existing ordinance regarding accessory building structures, it hasn't been modified other than what's indicated in the red print, or in the memo anyway. And I think that's the way it's been for a long time, that there's been a requirement in terms of accessory buildings, what the setbacks are and so forth. I think that's been a record a long time, and this ordinance wouldn't affect that.
Was there any discussion about changing that or lowering that?
Not P&Z.
Okay. Thank you.
Yield the floor.
I yield the floor to Rose.
Alderman Statter, you're next.
Thank you. I spoke about this when we originally discussed this ordinance, and I want to bring it up again, because if you look at the last sentence of section 1.5, well, actually the last two, for purposes of this subsection, any area adjoining a street right-of-way shall be considered a front yard. Right off the top of my head in Ward 2, I can think of two houses who will now never be allowed to have a swing set for their children, via this ordinance. We have a young family that lives at Doorcrest, Parkshire, and Edian Park. They have 3 front yards based on this ordinance, and the remaining side yard that they have is only feet wide. I think we need to have some exception in place for these homes that have multiple front yards by our standards. Otherwise, we're doing a disservice to those families, whether it's allowing an avenue for them to get an exception when, for instance, the one at Doorcrest, Parkshire, and Edian Park is quite obviously their backyard. Anybody looking at it would say that's their backyard. And they got an exception to have a fence put up. It looks like a backyard. But based on this ordinance, if they tried to put a swing set in their backyard, we could make them take it down. I think we've got to have some kind of exception process in place for that.
Okay. All right. Alderman Kennedy, you were next.
Yeah, I actually agree with Alderman Statter. I wanted just to suggest another change in the section 1.5, the second sentence that starts, however. That's where we kind of talk about grandfathering, and Alderman Anderson mentioned about a change there. But I also wanted to, after it says if it's affixed to the ground, I like just to add or a tree, because if we're we have a lot of tire swings that should be grandfathered in, and they're not really attached to the ground. So I'd just like to make that clear that all these people with tire swings are not going to be immediately in violation of our code. So I would suggest inserting that into the amendment. Thank you.
Alderman Miguel.
Thank you, Your Honor. What concerns me is that the list of items in section 5 here, it's very specific. And it seems to me that it would be nice if we had some sort of a catch-all phrase in there. Now, again, I look at this list and I would ask, what about a portable or movable backboard? There are poles with rims, basketball, that are movable, that are on wheels. You can tilt them and move them around. But they seem to be permanent fixtures. Again, based on the language here, I would ask, well, what about a badminton set? Would that be, that's not restricted, so can I put that in my front yard? So I just don't think I could think of every conceivable possible thing that I would want to prohibit. So what about a tent? Birthday tents. So I haven't been able to come up with any language myself. Maybe someone could help me come up with some sort of language to put a catch-all phrase in there. someone could help me, I'd be happy to yield the floor.
Chairman Sweeney at the Planning and Zoning Commission had recommended at one point that we just prohibit all items and then we carve out items that you want to permit. He said that might make it easier in order to understand. So that was ultimately thrown out, and the ordinance that sits before you tonight is what was recommended, but that's an option.
I think the problem is that, we don't know what somebody's gonna invent next week, that's gonna be a outdoor type structure, and where does it end? I guess that's the question, where does it end? I would just caution the board that, the front yard obviously is the most visible, and that would be the area that I would be most concerned with. And Stadler's comment regarding the few neighbors that have three sides that face a street, it's obvious that the back of their house is their backyard, and that should be allowed. But the front yard, side yard, no. So, I just think that maybe that we need to take a step back, let the city attorney consider a rewrite on that section 5, and then bring it back to the board with the comments that have been made tonight, because those would be substantial changes. Alderman, maybe?
I would agree with, I guess I'll start with the final thing. My thought was that we, obviously after we're done with our discussion, we will hear from a couple members of the public if anyone wants to speak on this, but then we would do a first reading, but then have the city attorney make, rather than us trying to make amendments on the fly tonight, I would agree that I would rather have the city attorney take our discussion into account and propose refinements to bring to us at our next meeting before a second reading. But I would agree with most of what was said tonight. I think going down the list, I think Alderman Charbonneau's remarks about a temporary bounce house where it's truly a one-day thing, like on a Saturday, I don't think we'd have a problem with that. But if someone wanted to leave one up for a month, I think we'd all have a problem with that. Enormous, full-size soccer goals in the front yard, that's, you would hope good taste would prohibit that, but apparently not. I mean, we've had the reason for this ordinance was around the St. Louis area making the news. You had people erecting enormous playhouses in front yards, and in the city of Crestwood, we had multiple people put up enormous trampolines in front yards that degraded property values all around. Alderman Anderson's remark about securely fastened, I think that's a perfectly fine amendment. Affixed to the ground, or a tree, such as the case may be, as proposed by Alderman Kennedy, I thought that was fine. As for basketball goals, I thought we had discussed that, and my personal feeling on that was I wouldn't, especially a portable basketball goal or even a permanent one, I think those are fine and don't degrade a neighborhood like these other things we've included. Alderman Miguel's comment, I'd be curious to see what the city attorney would come up with, but I think a catch-all phrase may be appropriate. At the end of the list, maybe we put "or like items," something along those lines. And if some new item comes along that we anticipate being an issue, we can explicitly add it to the ordinance later. But I think the list we have is pretty good. I think the grandfathering is appropriate, so we're not making people rip out things that are there. And then I guess finally, Alderman Statter's comments about the houses that have the 2 or 3 front yard issues. I know at some point we'll probably deal with that because it's proven to be a common issue. I'll say first, there's a reason that those corner lots sell for less than other houses. They bring some issues with them, but I do think probably in this ordinance, I don't think we want to prohibit people from swing sets in what most people would perceive to be a backyard, even if it's technically a front yard. So I wonder if we should put some kind of a clarification, and maybe rather than the way the code defines a front yard with regard to streets, maybe we tie it to the front door. The yard opposite the front door of the house, it can be allowed, notwithstanding, the definition of front yard. I'm not sure how that would be worded, but I think some kind of an exception to make it clear that these items are allowed in a, what most people would perceive to be a backyard, even on a corner lot, would be acceptable. And that's all I have.
Alderman Waller?
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. Again, I agree with the comments that's been expressed, Alderman Beatty, as well as Alderman Statter, in regards to these houses which have front yards on both sides. It's no different from the fences, the issues that I have here with the fences as well, because it really provides them not an injustice, but just inequity in regards to those homes. And I think we need to take a look at those homes. Other than that the resident, and based on this ordinance, has to go for a variance. And I don't know if you want to go for a variance for $500 for a place that. So it just doesn't seem to be right. I do agree, though, that I think we need to define it as to what is prohibited. I don't know if I like kind of quality, but whatever, but I just think it needs to be defined and not open-ended. So I like that approach. And I do agree with the way that, again, it does express, again, it does give a time limitation as to, again, if it's in place, if it's structured in place, and it stays. Because, again, I do have some residents within our ward that actually have a tire, but again, it's a decorative swing tires, but it looks nice. So I don't want to take that away from that homeowner as well. So I do like the changes that's been expressed, and again, I just think that what Alderman Stadler said in regards to the front yard issues on these various houses needs to be looked at again to address those residents. Thanks.
So do you include, because of some of the items you have on here, do you include the Christmas decorations in people's front yards? The inflatables, which is similar to a bounce house, but although it's not used as a bounce house, but inflatables, and we do have some people around Crestwood who do pretty elaborate displays that have been doing so for some time, and they've become quite a draw to our community. So, I think if we're either not going to put that in here, or we're going to eliminate that as one of the items.
Question that. But based upon those inflatables that are just for Christmas time, again, that's not prohibited from this.
That's what I'm saying. But that's up for a much longer period of time than a bounce house,
right?
Potentially.
No, I would think, again, those items are just seasonal for Christmas time. That should be allowed. Again, like you said, it's a seasonal thing. Again, that's not on the list as prohibited, so I don't think that would be allowed in the event that this ordinance would pass.
Okay. Do we need to be specific?
I think I have enough guidance to go back.
Right.
I would, when everyone's done, I would like to ask one question though.
Sure.
If that's what the board is.
There are no further lights, please.
So I'm just a little bit unclear on the corner lot issue, just so is it the consensus of the board to allow these things in corner lots, or is it if that was the case, I would take out that last sentence in there? Or is it the consensus of the board to just allow them to be dealt with through the Board of Adjustment, or do we have a consensus to take that out, Mary?
That would be my recommendation, that we take that out, or as Alderman maybe suggested, specifically say for lots with multiple adjacencies to a right-of-way,
Okay.
a backyard is allowed, and a backyard is considered to be the yard opposite of where the front door, something along those lines. Yeah,
Okay.
everybody's good with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Alderman maybe?
I don't have anything else.
Okay. Alderman Anderson?
The one point on that discussion there, the proposed ordinance does talk about front and side yards. So you would have to define, unless you were going to eliminate side yards, you would have to define the backyard specifically. Otherwise, because the houses that we're talking about could very easily be considered a side yard. And if you just eliminate the front requirement, you've still got a side requirement. So my thought would be is you just say, for purpose of this ordinance, that every house shall have only one front yard and shall be considered to have only one front yard, and that shall be the, this would be allowable in the yard part of it. Well, it's Alderman maybe said.
Maybe it's,
You want to waive the rules? You've already had your second shot at the microphone.
I think I said I had nothing further to say, I guess I lied about that.
I'm sorry, but it's your rule. Do you wish to
I
proceed?
think I have, well, go ahead.
I'll move to allow a third talking time on this.
All right. We have a motion. We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay.
I mean,
Okay, Alderman, maybe go ahead.
I mean, this issue's come up in a bunch of facets where it's always these corner lots. I mean, for your average house on a typical street, it's going to have two side yards, a front yard, and a rear yard. And I think the intent of the board is to have these things in a backyard, not in a front yard. But these corner lots wind up with 2 or 3 front yards and or side yards based on how those yards are defined elsewhere in the zoning code. So I think at a minimum, the city attorney would need to strike the last sentence, but it doesn't deal with the problem of the required front or side yard. So I guess I would have her look at that and see what can be done with respect to corner lots, or do we just say these items are allowed in a backyard, and do we define a backyard as being the yard that is, opposite the front door, basically, at the rear of the structure. I don't know. I'd have to think about this and research it, but I think that would be the guidance, is that every house would have at least one backyard where these things would be allowed.
I mean, I would think backyard would be that piece of the property that extends beyond the rear corners of the structure. So, in other words, just like your front yard, the front of the building determines your front building line, and your rear building line would be the back of your house and would go straight out, parallel with the rear of the structure. Would that be correct, Mr. Gill? You're looking over it like you want to say something.
I'm just trying to make sure I hear everything that you're saying, Your Honor.
Okay.
Could you please repeat that last part again?
Yeah, that the front property line is that property that sets in front of a line that's drawn across the front of the building line.
Yes.
In each direction. And the rear building line would basically be the same line running parallel to the back of the structure.
In your standard lot, yes.
Okay. So if someone were putting something in their backyard, it would have to be something that's built behind that building line.
In the backyard, it just would be behind the back of the house, of the structure, yes.
Okay. All right.
And I think, I understand, I just wanted to make sure, we can come back with other language. I just wanted to make sure I understood what the overall intent was.
Okay. Think further, Alderman, maybe?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Alderman Anderson?
No.
Okay. Alderman Miguel?
Only my second, Your Honor.
I'm sorry?
It's only my second.
Let's wrap it up.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is getting a little too convoluted for me. The current language and the current setbacks and definitions are fine as they exist right now. I think they're fine. To try and come up with language to change these for this particular purpose strikes me as rather convoluted or complex. I'm struggling to think of a house on Pardee. Did you say Pardee or Garber?
It's right across from Southview School. You may recall that about 2 years ago they came and asked for a fencing variance because they have essentially 3 front yards based on our code, and they have 2 very small children.
You were here, Stuart.
You were here.
George Crestwood.
Oh, correct. Yeah, I know what you mean, but I can't picture where there's 3.
Right across the street from where Mr. Tishless used to live.
And I will tell you why, because when you look at it.
Oh,
it's not
you're right, I'm with you,
yard.
I'm with you. Okay.
And it's not the only one. I think at that time we identified that there were 7 or 8 homes like that in the city.
Okay, now, I kind of had a conversation recently with Mr. Gillum on what a resident was trying to do in Ward 3. And he kind of explained to me how he looks at rear yards. And perhaps Mr. Gillum can help me out again, but we're looking at a property, standard corner lot. You would think the backyard is what you would encounter if you just went through the front door and straight through the house. However, he explained to me that he looks at that as a side yard because the amount of space there is very limited, with something like maybe 10 feet. So he considered the side yard as the backyard.
We have one like that in Ward 2 as well.
So,
At least one I can think of right now.
so if that interpretation is valid, would that apply here to the house that you're referring to, perhaps?
Alderman Statter.
If I can just respond. I think what we're trying to do is actually let our city attorney, she understands what we're trying to get to, and I think we need to let this go and let her reword it and see what she comes up with and see if that meets our standards.
Okay. And I would just say, so hopefully it won't be too convoluted.
I'm certainly going to try it and not be.
Thank you, Your Honor, that's all I have.
All right. Okay. That was tedious. I see no other lights. So do we want to do a first reading on this, or we want to just table this, city attorney?
As is, point of order, Alderman Sharp, you want to ask to have the public has remarks on this,
Yeah, we'll do that, but I'm just asking the city attorney how far we want to push this, because it'll come back to us for a second public hearing.
It doesn't have to come back as a second public hearing
Okay.
if we table it.
Okay.
We can continue the public hearing. That might be, if you want to table it, I would recommend that we continue the public hearing to the next meeting, and we'll provide you with a new ordinance and.
I mean, there's just too many changes to take
Right.
the first reading tonight, quite frankly.
But
Okay.
even though you should still.
Okay,
everyone
yeah, well,
wants
I'll
to
take,
talk tonight.
yeah, I'm going to. Anyone on this side care to speak on this, Chester? Please state your name and address for the record.
Ismail Ayouaz, 8915 Milton Lane. I agree a little bit with this part 5. I understand that we don't want to have toilets and stuff like this, or big trampolines and playgrounds on the front door, but if you have a discrete, rope swing or stuff like this, like I do, and my daughter loves that, from time to time going in the front yard and playing with it, it's very discreet, it's wood made. I mean, I don't see any problem with that. I just don't understand why you want to prohibit rope swings and stuff like this. If it's discreet and it doesn't change much the curb appeal of the home and the neighborhood, it makes no sense to me. And I think I remember talk to you about that. So I just want to make that comments. I think we need to have a comprehensive list of what needs to be prohibited, but rope swings and stuff like this is discreet and green just to help a little bit with the curb appeal of the home. I don't think it should be an issue for you guys. And I'm pretty sure you're going to hear people not being happy with that. Actually, I have some people commenting right now on Facebook who are not happy with that. So just to let you know, guys. Thank you.
Anyone else care to speak on this subject? See no further hands? So I'll ask for a motion. Alderman Charbonneau?
I was actually just going to make a motion to table I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Okay, go ahead.
And take our proceedings to continue the public
And
hearing.
why don't we do one
You want to
motion?
table, make a motion to table this issue and then we'll.
I'll make a motion to table this issue and continue at a future meeting.
Okay,
Second.
we have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Okay? So it will be tabled, and we will continue the public hearing at that time. Alderman, maybe did you have something else?
I was going to make a similar motion.
Okay. All right. Next item on the agenda is another public hearing. This one is an ordinance amending Chapter 26, Article 4, Division 7 of the Municipal Code of the City of Crestwood, Missouri, to revise Sections 26-235 and 26-236 relating to minimum parking. We'll open the public hearing on that. Any member of the board have any comments regarding this issue? Alderman Kennedy?
Just wanted to ask Adam a couple questions. So, can you explain sort of the philosophy behind the maximum number of parking spaces?
The philosophy behind maximums are the fact that you limit the amount of parking or space that can be used for parking for different uses. And that's an aggressive way of promoting infill through the community. It's also an aggressive way of promoting green space within the community. So you no longer allow vacant space within the city to, again, permeate itself. We know we have different uses within Crestwood in which our parking lots sit empty 80% of the time, and they're never utilized to their full potential. And so that maximum standard is meant to address that through miniature steps. As new uses come online, we can now promote infill on those parking lots. But again, just for the board's information, it is very aggressive, and although planning and zoning signed off on it, I need you to understand that we'll be one of the first communities in St. Louis to adopt parking maximums. It is an east and west coast philosophy. I don't know of anybody located near us that has maximums. But again, as we've stated in the comprehensive plan, and as we've talked about, through multiple conversations, this is something that we're after, is promoting density and infill on our parking lots. So, sorry, long answer.
That was good, thank you. And I would agree that some of these are aggressive, and I like where you're going with that. I just have one. I'll just recommend one change, and that is on the under commercial uses on page 6, item 3, where we have general office. We're suggesting that the maximum be 3 parking spaces for every 1,000 square feet. And that's not a bad ratio for like the high rent district of Clayton, but for most of the suburban office buildings, 4 per 1,000 would be more of a normal. And so I think I would recommend changing that to the maximum be 4 per 1,000 versus 3 parking spaces for 1,000 square feet. That was the one comment I had. Thank you.
Did you say office buildings? That's number 6 is gas stations.
No, on page 6.
Oh, page 6.
Page 6. So item 3, under general offices. That's for.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to change it from maximum of 3 parking spaces to a maximum of 4 parking spaces.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to change the number of parking spaces maximum from 3 to 4. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Okay. That it, Alderman Kennedy?
Yes, thank you.
Alderman Maybe?
I had I guess a question for Mr. Jones on page 2 in the administrative requirements down in subsection C. There's some language added that says an applicant for a use at a multiple use building may apply for an alternative parking plan pursuant to section 26-237 of the code. And I guess first off, the alternative parking plan could reduce a minimum or raise a maximum if the the Planning and Zoning Board approve that. Is that fair to say?
It can reduce minimums, but it cannot alter maximums. The alteration of maximums would come into account underneath page. What is in here? Underneath page 5 at the hang on one second. Sorry, that's incorrect. Yeah, sorry, page 5 at the top. In order to increase the maximum parking space requirements and ratios specified in 26-236 by more than 10%, an alternative parking plan may be granted by the plan. Oh yeah, so I apologize, Alderman, maybe you are correct.
Okay, so we're fair enough. So I want to start from that baseline that if we have kind of these aspirational minimums and maximums, but if there was some odd site requirements or good cause shown for a particular use, planning and zoning, and eventually this board in our discretion could alter these.
Yes.
And then the second question I had was where you were earlier a moment ago on page 5. We've got basically, hey, you can apply for this alternative parking plan. And it just says that an applicant can do it. But then where I was on page 2, it says an applicant for a use at a multiple use building. And I know we passed the alternative parking plan some months back. I did not bring that ordinance with me. Can anyone apply for one, or does it have to be a multiple use building? And where I'm going to is, could we strike the phrase multiple use building in that subsection C and have it just read an applicant for a use, I guess, or it'd be at a minimum, a multiple use building, sorry, would be the stricken language. So it would just say an applicant for a use may apply for an alternative parking plan, and so on and so forth.
I think that would be appropriate. I think what planning and zoning meant by introducing this amendment was the fact that the alternative parking plan was originally created to address multiple shopping centers like we have, where we have multiple uses within one parcel. But your amendment is astute, and I would it's a good change, I think.
Well, that's one of the first times one of my amendments has ever been called astute. So I'm gonna take it while the getting's good, and I'll make a motion to strike the language beginning with at and closing with building in that subsection C on page 2. So it would just read, an applicant for a use may apply for an alternative parking plan pursuant to section 26-237 of this code.
Okay, we have a motion to second to change C under 26-235 administrative requirements.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could withdraw my motion and remake it to also include the phrase for a use, so it would just read, an applicant may apply for an alternative parking plan, with a hat tip to the city attorney for that change.
Okay. Understood, Alderman Charbonneau. I think you were the one who seconded it.
I'll second.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Okay. City attorney, clear on that?
I am, thank you.
Okay. What else you want to change, Alderman, maybe?
I think it looks good. I concur with Alderman Kennedy. I like and Mr. Jones and planning and zoning. I like the sentiment behind this, but I just want to make sure that we're not boxing in an applicant who may have some special requirements. And with this language, I think I'm satisfied with the ordinance.
Okay. Alderman Miguel, you were next.
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess that change probably covers what I was going to mention, but I'll still bring it up. And that is that there's a number of instances in here where the minimums and the maximums are the same. So that kind of leaves a little margin there. And I just kind of wondered if that's really what we're trying to do, is be so tight with some of these that we shoehorn somebody into exactly this many parking spaces. Because, I mean, it's nice to have a little discretion in there. I'm looking specifically at page 5, under A2, B1, one-bedroom dwelling units shall have 1.5 spaces. And this is for multifamily dwellings. So if there's 25 units, that would mean I'd have 37.5 parking spaces. Not 37 or 38, but 37.5. So not a big deal, and I think it's kind of covered by what was just suggested, but I'm wondering if some of those mins or maxes could be adjusted a little bit. So just a thought. And a little further down on that, I think there's a typo, but I could be wrong. Under A3B, the third line, square feet of floor are therein, should that be area?
Yep.
Okay, that's all I have, Your Honor, thank you.
Okay. So we'll correct that typographical error. Okay, Alderman Anderson?
Going back to Alderman Maybe's amendment, that language that's there is a subsection, and it relates to parking for multiple use buildings. My understanding is Alderman Maybe's intention is that would be a standalone provision and would not just relate to multiple use buildings. And I'm wondering whether that language should be set aside and given its own, designation F or some other, we've got A, B, C, D, E, or whatever, whether that shouldn't have its own designation so that it would be applicable to all situations as opposed to just being in the section with parking for multiple use buildings. That's my thought.
I would ask Mr. Jones, if we took that sentence and put it at the very end, maybe even just made it a K and made it a standalone, would you be okay with the substance of that?
Yeah, I believe so. 26-237 allows anyone multiple use building or single use building to apply for the alternative parking plan.
So if an alderman wants to make a motion to amend it, to move that sentence and make it a separate, as subsection K?
I'll make that motion that the language be set out in a subsection K, and the language, an applicant, I'm not sure how much exactly.
Let me clarify that, Alderman Anderson. Let's, so we have a motion basically to move Alderman Maybe and the board's previous approved amendment to that sentence to number K
Yes.
at the end of that section.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Do we have a second to that motion?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, Grant seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Okay, done. Let's see here. Okay, city clerk clear on those changes? Okay, so we can do it. Ask if there's, let's see, we've already taken comments from the audience on that.
Yeah.
Okay, does anyone in the audience have any comments regarding this issue? I see no hands. Okay. All right, then, do I have a motion and a second to close this public hearing?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Do I have a motion and a second for a first reading of this as amended?
So moved. Second.
Bill number, please.
1739.
Yes, sit down, Alderman Kennedy, please. Alderman Kennedy, if you do the honors, please.
Bill number 1739, introduced by Alderman Kennedy. An ordinance amending Chapter 26, Article 4, Division 7 of the Municipal Code of the City of Crestwood, Missouri to revise Section 26-235 and 26-236 relating to minimum parking requirements.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Miguel,
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau,
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy,
Yes.
Alderman Reading,
Yes.
Alderman Beatty,
Yes.
Alderman Statter,
Yes.
Alderman Anderson,
Yes.
Alderman Wall.
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion is passed.
Thank you. Do we have a motion and a second for a second reading?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Alderman Anderson, would you do the honors, please?
Yes. Bill number 17-39, introduced by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance amending Chapter 26, Article 4, Division 7 of the Municipal Code of the City of Crestwood, Missouri, to revise Sections 26-235 and 26-236 relating to minimum parking requirements as amended.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Statter,
Yes.
Alderman Anderson,
Yes.
Alderman Wallach,
Yes.
Alderman Beatty,
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau,
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy,
Yes.
Alderman Reading,
Yes.
Alderman Miguel.
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion has passed.
Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing regarding an ordinance amending Chapter 26, Article 4 of the Municipal Code of the City of Crestwood, Missouri to amend Section 26-109 relating to lighting standards. I'll open this public hearing. Does anyone on the board have any? Alderman, maybe?
Yeah, I think this ordinance is appropriate and overdue. Right now, if a builder was building a new subdivision in Crestwood, our code would make them put in the old style high-pressure sodium lights, and then the city adopts those lights and becomes responsible for paying the electric bill. And I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I want to say we pay something like $75,000 or $80,000 a year in electric costs just for the street light grid. And I imagine the LEDs probably use a third to a half, if not less, of the power of the other types. And especially with, I think we are actually well under the required number of street lights in our code, and that's something we, in future years, maybe adding some more lights. So I think it'd be good to get out in front of this and have people put in the newer style lights to save the city money going forward. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, see no other lights from the board. Does anyone in the audience have any questions regarding this issue or comments? See no hands. So, I will ask for a motion and a second to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Okay, I now need a motion and a second for a first reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Bill number, please.
1740.
Sit down. Alderman Statter, if you do the honor, please.
Bill number 1740, introduced by Alderman Statter, an ordinance amending Chapter 26, Article 4 of the Municipal Code of the City of Crestwood, Missouri, to amend Section 26-109 relating to lighting standards.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Anderson,
Yes.
Alderman Wallach,
Yes.
Alderman Statter,
Yes.
Alderman Reading,
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau,
Yes.
Alderman Miguel,
Yes.
Alderman Beatty,
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy.
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion has passed.
We have a motion and a second for a second reading.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Alderman Sharpman, would you do the honors, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Bill number 17-40, introduced by Alderman Satter. An ordinance amending Chapter 26, Article 4 of the Municipal Code of the City of Crestwood, Missouri, to amend Section 26-109 relating to lighting standards.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Miguel,
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau,
Yes.
Alderman Stack. Yes. Alderman Wallach,
Yes.
Alderman Anderson,
Yes.
Alderman Breeding,
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy,
Yes.
Alderman Beatty.
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion has passed.
Okay. And that concludes our public hearings for this evening. Next item on the agenda is Mayor, Board of Aldermen, and City Administrator reports and/or comments. Alderman Brady. Thank you. Alderman Waller.
No report, but just maybe some guidance to the city attorney as we talked about the accessory buildings tonight. And I've been looking at the Maryland Heights City Code as it relates to fences, and that actually designates on an interior lot, on a corner lot, and also on a double front lot. It designates what is allowed for the fences, and I don't know whether it has anything in regards to accessory buildings that may provide some guidance to our code that we want.
Okay. Alderman Stetter.
I have no report for beautification because we spoke about that last time and haven't met since. I did want to point out the Troop 580 out of Long Elementary has had at least 3 or 4 young men complete Eagle projects in White Cliff over the last few months. This troop is on a pace to have a record number of Eagle Scouts in the 2017 calendar year. And they've done a lot of work in the White Cliff area for us, but I think we'll be seeing quite a few of them come in to be recognized before too long. Just wanted to point out the work that our scouts are doing in our community. Thank you.
Alderman Sharpman.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I do not have a report. I have 2 quick announcements. First announcement is there will be a fire board meeting Monday evening here at 7 o'clock. Second announcement is just a reminder that coming up in September, we do have the National Night Out, and I encourage everyone to participate. I myself am going to have a block party. I recommend that others have a block party as well. I think it'd be great for every one of us to do that or host that maybe jointly. But I am planning on having one myself. It is September 16th. So mark that on your calendars, and if you can, try to have a block party or something to raise awareness for the night out. Just another note, in the past, the police department and fire department are willing for those night outs to stop by your parties if you make arrangements in advance. So just a reminder of that. Thank you, Your Honor.
Alderman Maybe.
Yes, Your Honor. The Alderman Miguel and myself attended the Public Works Board meeting on August the 16th. One matter was postponed. It's an appeal for a fence at 9406 Crestwood Manor Drive. The primary issue was one side of the fence was constructed with the smooth side facing inward rather than outward. So that'll be heard at the next meeting. Second item was there was a request from a resident to put one of those lending libraries in the landscaping island at Montego Drive and Tahiti Drive. The Public Works Board expressed reservations with driver line of sights having the lending library there, as well as pedestrian safety crossing the street to get to it. But there was a general consensus that the lending library would be welcome further down Tahiti off the walking trail in Spelman Park, and would join lending libraries that are already present in White Cliff and Crestwood Park. And so I believe that applicant is going to get their ducks in a row and take that to the Parks Board for whatever certifications are needed to make that happen. Thirdly, there were various code revisions discussed, and they weren't finally blessed, but the things being discussed are shifting responsibility for sidewalks from residents to the city. And the remaining ones concerned our tree code and the landscape code. with anticipation of the city spending significant funds this next year to fix sidewalks, much of which are damaged by tree roots. One of the proposals is prohibiting new trees from being planted between the street and the sidewalk. Secondly, prohibiting trees within a certain amount of feet from a sidewalk in a front yard. That distance was a point of discussion. There was not really a consensus on that. And then thirdly, when a new subdivision is built, we require a builder to put trees along the street every so many feet. And so that code is being revised to have builders put in trees but not have them installed between the sidewalk and the street, but rather further back in the yards to keep the tree canopy but not have our sidewalks be messed up by tree roots. And then I did not write down the detailed list. I don't know if Mr. Gillum has it handy, but the Public Works employees have been extremely active in the community, working on all kinds of projects. I know they're actually constructing a street. We had the slab replacement project through a contractor, but city employees are rebuilding one street in-house, and they're also doing significant maintenance to a lot of the walking trails in White Cliff Park. And Mr. Higdon was talking so fast I couldn't take down my notes, but there's like 50 projects being worked on right now. So I don't know if you have those handy, Mr. Gillum, or just...
I don't have the list with me, but you know, it's Cameron Avenue and then the bridge in White Cliff Park off of Morningstar were two of the bigger items.
Okay, so the staff, employees and staff are busy and doing great things in the community. Thank you.
Alderman Miguel?
Yeah, I would just add on to what Alderman Mabee said, and he certainly gave a complete report, and there was some good discussion at that meeting. The one thing that kind of I found troubling, though, is that, and this is probably an exception to this that occurred, the issue that was postponed required a vote on the part of Public Works. It was for an exception that the resident, the owner, was seeking relative to a fence. It would have required a majority of the membership, which means 4 votes. But there were only 4 members present at that particular meeting. Consequently, the resident would have had to receive a yes vote from each member present. That obviously put him at a great disadvantage. He also had a couple of other residents in attendance that were supportive of his position, but when you require 4 out of 4, that's a high hurdle. So to me, that kind of did not reflect well on this particular board or on the city. And I think that we need to address that issue internally or as a board publicly, perhaps. But we really put those people at a disadvantage, really in that position, especially since they had neighbors coming out to vouch for their position. So I just wanted to make that point, that these boards, the attendance at these boards is really important. That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Alderman Anderson?
No report.
Thank you. Alderman Kennedy?
Just one comment. We had a Eclipse watch party yesterday at the Crestwood Park. It was actually a pretty good crowd, and the highlight, of course, was when it became a total eclipse. What really was exciting at that location was all the school children along school, just hearing them all the excitement has a, you know, the sky got dark and the crickets started chirping. The kids just were just like screaming with excitement. It was just really wonderful to be there to hear all that and see all that. So I just want to make that comment.
Alderman Wall, you missed your...
No, I don't have any questions. So one of the Alderman, in regards to the fence issue as it relates to public works to either Alderman Maybe or Miguel. Now, was it an appeal from a resident in regards to the side of the fence? I didn't understand the appeal process as it relates to the public works board and not a variance issue. So if you could provide me some clarity, or maybe staff provide me clarity, why these went before the public works board?
Yes, it was.
I don't know that that's appropriate for comments. You're asking a question about Public Works Board and how they conducted their business. Can you provide him with that after the meeting?
Sure.
Okay. Is that all right?
That's fine.
Thank you. Alderman Charbonneau?
I had one clarification for the same report, different question though.
Can you address that to Alderman maybe after the meeting?
I could. I do think it's important to clarify.
Well, I think we're getting into business that involves a board that.
I can bring it up our meetings.
Okay, that'd be fine. Thank you. All right. City Administrator, you have a comment?
Thank you, Mayor. For the members of the public that are here, I have bittersweet news. Bitter because we'll be sorry to miss him, but sweet because he's going to be moving on to bigger and better things. But for those of you who aren't aware, our own Chief Arnoldy has announced his retirement effective next February. He just passed 44 years as an employee with the city of Crestwood, and obviously he will be sorely missed, and we'll have many months to bask in his presence, but obviously certainly someone that will be hard to replace. Please wish him well in his retirement.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chief. I appreciate your service to the city, and certainly know there'll be a very smooth transition. Thank you. City Attorney?
I have no report.
And I have no report. Okay, next item on the agenda would be public comment. Any of all you people out there have anything to say? I guess not. All right, I see no hands. We'll move on then to old business. See none. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. Any members of the board that wish to remove any item from the consent agenda, please state so now. Alderman Anderson?
Just the last one relating to the ordinance relating to the city administrator.
Okay. All right. See no other lights. So, do I have a motion and a second for the first reading? Alderman Miguel?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the general fund budget.
Okay. All right. Now, do I have a motion and a second for a first reading?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Do I have a motion and a second for a second reading?
So moved.
I have a motion. You have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Will the city clerk please read the titles twice of those ordinances and resolution?
Approval of the August 8, 2017 regular meeting minutes. An ordinance amending ordinance number 4713, the capital improvement fund budget for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2017, relating to the city's improvement program and the accounting for capital improvement fund expenditures. An ordinance amending ordinance number 4712, the Park and Stormwater Fund budget for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2017, relating to the Community Center and the Savington House and the accounting of the Park and Stormwater Fund expenditures, and a resolution, resolution number 1705, a resolution in support of an application for a grant to fund improvements to Rayburn Park. I'll repeat the ordinances for the second time. An ordinance amending ordinance number 4713, the Capital Improvement Fund budget for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2017, relating to the city's improvement program and the accounting of Capital Improvement Fund expenditures, and an ordinance amending ordinance number 4712, the Park and Stormwater Fund budget for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2017, relating to the Community Center and the Savington House and the accounting of the Park and Stormwater Fund expenditures.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Reading?
Yes.
Alderman Wallach?
Yes.
Alderman Stafford?
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau?
Yes.
Alderman Beatty?
Yes.
Alderman Miguel?
Yes.
Alderman Anderson?
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy?
Yes.
8 ayes, the consent agenda has passed.
Okay. We will now move on to those items removed from the consent agenda. We'll start with the first one, which was Alderman Miguel with regards to the general fund budget.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ordinance page 74 and 75. The increases in the general fund are substantial. $109,000 for contracted fire protection at Afton, I assume. $75,000 for legal expenses, $70,000 for additional overtime, $42,000 for a employee for the remainder of the year, and $35,000 for higher than expected reimbursement claims. So if I add that up correctly, we're looking at roughly $330,000. And that would be in addition to the deficit projected at budget time, which was 525, I believe. So looking at a general fund deficit of a little over $850,000. That pretty much runs through the tax increase. That of projection of 1.1 million. So, as I look at the increases here for the general fund that we're talking about tonight, it seems to be that in dollar terms, most of those will be ongoing costs. And the city administrator is shaking negatively. Would you like to explain why you disagree with that, Mr. Simpson?
The $109,000 does have the potential to be an ongoing cost, depending on the outcome of litigation this board is engaged in. The $75,000 increase in legal expenses is a one-time, hopefully, expense, depending on the outcome and the progression of the litigation the city is involved in. The $70,000 overtime is to account for higher than typical overtime usage. We would expect that this is what we need with the addition of the floater that this board has previously discussed. We would expect that additional $70,000 is what we need in order to get through the rest of the year. However, we would expect overtime to revert back to a more traditional level as we have seen just an extraordinary number of injuries and FMLA leave for the birth of children and other things. So that item, not really an ongoing expense. And then the addition of the floater, that $41,793 is just the cost of that additional employee, which this board debated and authorized at earlier meetings. Just for the remainder of this year, the full cost of that is obviously higher than that, but again, we did so with the expectation that that's going to save us money in the long run on overtime costs because of the shifts that that floating employee is going to be able to pick up. And then the increase of $35,000 is, again, that I neglected to include the word deductible reimbursement claims. This is the line that contains the funds from which we reimburse employees for a high deductible health plan from between $5,000 and $1,000. And sort of in line with the increased overtime usage, as you can imagine, we've had some injuries and some other issues going on with the deductible reimbursements that have resulted in higher than typical usage. And so I would anticipate that that $35,000 is more of a one-time thing. We will obviously study our deductible reimbursement usage and every year come up with what we believe to be an appropriate budget amount, and maybe that's going to be a number that's greater than what's in this year's budget, but I don't anticipate it being $35,000 higher every single year. So most of these are hopefully one-time expenses, and depending on how things go, maybe even less than that.
Hopefully you're right. I would point out that we are hiring, while the position may be part-time this year, next year it will be full-time. So to me, that pretty much covers the 70 and the 41,000, or most of it. You have a better handle on the reimbursement than I do, but if we're looking at $35,000 more this year, there is risk in that reimbursement, and maybe this is the year that it's biting us, but then again, there's risk there, and so the ongoing cost would at least be six-figure. So I'll leave it at that. Still, when you add that to the current deficit, we're eating quite a bit into that 1.1 million. And that's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Charter, did you have a comment?
Well, the city administrator actually answered most of the questions that I was going to agree with him on in responding, but I do just want to point out again that, this plan with the fire department, I'm in full support of this. I think it's a great idea for us. It will also benefit us next year when it comes to the overtime by hiring additional firefighter paramedics. So I just want to say I am in support of this, and I will be voting yes for this provision. Thank you, Your Honor. Yield the floor.
Okay. See no other lights? So I will ask if there is a motion and a second for a first reading. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Bill number, please.
1743.
Yes, Your Honor. Bill number 1743, introduced by Alderman Mabee. An ordinance amending ordinance number 4711, the general fund budget as amended for the fiscal year beginning January the 1st, 2017, relating to various general funds and the accounting of general fund expenditures.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Bullock.
Yes.
Alderman Miguel.
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau.
Yes.
Alderman Mabee.
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy.
Yes.
Alderman Reed.
Yes.
Alderman Anderson.
Yes.
Alderman Stack.
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion has passed.
Fine, do we have a motion and a second for a second reading, please?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Alderman Miguel, would you do the honor, please?
Bill number 17-43, introduced by Alderman Maybe. An ordinance amending ordinance number 4711, the general fund budget as amended for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2017, relating to various general funds and the accounting of general fund expenditures.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Charbonneau?
Yes.
Alderman Miguel?
Yes.
Alderman Reading?
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy?
Yes.
Alderman Statter? Yes. Alderman Maybe?
Yes.
Alderman Wallach?
Yes.
Alderman Anderson?
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion has passed.
Okay, thank you. The next item we will move on to then will be for the ordinance amending Article 3 of Chapter 2 of the Municipal Code of the City of Crestwood, Missouri, to revise Section 2-53 relating to the city administrator. And Alderman Anderson, you pulled that, so the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. If I could direct your attention to page 99, item K, refers to political activity and indicates that the city administrator shall refrain from participation in the election of the members of the Board of Aldermen. I'm just wondering if we should add all elections or put the word mayor in there too. It seems to me, unless there's some reason not to, I would think we could put the mayor in there as well.
Would you repeat that section, please?
Sure, it's section K, well, it's in section 1, it's item K, and it's found on page 99.
Okay.
And it says that the city administrator shall refrain from participation in the election of the members of the Board of Aldermen. No problems with that. I'm just wondering whether it makes some sense to add the word mayor or all elections of the political elections of the city or something along those lines.
I mean, I don't care, but I think if you're going to add mayor, you need to add Board of Aldermen too.
Yeah, that's right. It says Board of Aldermen. I just wondered whether it would make some sense just to put the word mayor in there.
Yeah, we could add members of the board of aldermen and the mayor.
Right. I would make that motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Okay, so we will move forward then. Alderman Charbonneau, did you have a?
I was just going to make a motion to do the same thing. It's fine.
Okay, all right. So we have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second?
For the amendment of the first reading.
For the first reading.
I'll second.
Okay, all right.
Tim motion. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Tim's motion.
I'll second.
There we go.
Okay. All right, so Justin made the motion, Mary seconded it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Bill number, please.
1744.
Pass that down to Alderman Wallach, please, and that will be as amended.
Bill number 17-44, introduced by Alderman Wallach. An ordinance amending Article 3 of Chapter 2 of the Municipal Code of the City of Crestwood, Missouri, to revise Section 2-53 relating to the city administrator as amended.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Kennedy?
Yes.
Alderman Miguel?
Yes.
Alderman Statter?
Yes.
Alderman Wallach?
Yes.
Alderman Anderson?
Yes.
Alderman Maybe?
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau?
Yes.
Alderman Reed?
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion is passed.
Okay. We have a motion and a second for a second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Alderman Brady, would you do the honors, please?
Thank you. Bill number 1744, introduced by Alderman Wallach, an ordinance amending Article 3 of Chapter 2 of the Municipal Code of the City of Crestwood, Missouri to revise Section 2-53 relating to the city administrator.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Charbonneau?
Yes.
Alderman Anderson?
Yes.
Alderman Miguel?
Yes.
Alderman Green?
Yes.
Alderman Spatter?
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy?
Yes.
Alderman Beatty?
Yes.
Alderman Wall?
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion is passed.
Okay, that concludes the items removed from the consent agenda. This brings up the next item on the agenda, which is new business. And under new business, we have Mr. Simpson, new pay plan classification.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't rehash what's I've already covered in the memorandum, except to state that tonight we're just seeking sort of preliminary approval from the board to continue with the process of enacting these changes. I don't want to go through, Civil Service Board, for instance, and then bring you language that you all disagree with, as considering the sensitivity of the subject matter and the importance of the subject matter. So what I'm seeking tonight is your input, any tweaks, changes to either language in the draft Civil Service Rules chapter that's before you, or changes to the minimum and maximum ranges that are proposed in the classification plan. If everything's good to go, then we'll proceed and keep on chugging with this thing. There's still lots of work to be done, but it's one of those steps in the process.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Any questions from the board? Alderman Beatty?
Mr. Simpson, when is the next civil service meeting, or what kind of schedule do they need on an as-needed basis?
As needed.
Okay. And then how long do you anticipate they would take with their review of these proposed changes?
It's hard for me to say. I could see them being done in one meeting, or I could see it taking multiple meetings.
Okay. And I guess I'm kind of getting like a broad time frame. We're closing out the month of August, entering September. When do you anticipate having a draft budget to the Ways and Means Committee?
The draft budget would be, I believe, early November is what we were shooting for the Ways and Means, with it being presented publicly in late October.
Okay. So you would anticipate, with whatever the board does this evening and with whatever civil service does, presumably in September, this would come back to us in early October for an ordinance?
That's my wish. Let's see if it can happen.
Okay. Okay. No, I think a lot of thought and care has gone into this. I think while it's... obviously we had some budget amendments tonight due to some one-off events and some unfortunate circumstances, and there's never enough money to go around. I do like how we've moved some positions closer to reflect market rates. I think the flexibility with hiring and raises in this plan, both on an individual employee and on a class of employees, is appreciated. And I do like how, when compared to our past pay plan, how you have positions looked at independently instead of before we'd have 6 or 7 different job titles all tied to a number like 7, 8, or 9. And so anytime you wanted to make adjustments to a pay range, you were changing 7 or 8 positions, and here you can be a little more targeted, more of a rifle than a shotgun approach. So, and it's simpler. We're looking at a document that is less than 1/8 of an inch thick, and the old one was significantly thicker, and a lot of, I imagine there was probably some internal confusion. Hopefully this makes things a little more straightforward, so that's all I've got.
Okay. Alderman Charbonneau?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to add that I do appreciate Chris and staff taking a look at this. I know that it's not an easy task, but I do think we're headed in the right direction here, and I think one that will actually benefit the employees in the long run compared to the current system. I think this will reward employees that are good employees and that continue to work hard for the city, but more importantly for the residents. I think this will be beneficial for us. And as Alderman maybe has mentioned, it puts us more in line with peer cities' pay range, which is good to make sure that we continue to hire and retain good quality employees. And I yield the floor.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? I see no other lights. Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Thank you. Okay. Alderman Charbonneau, you wanted to bring forth a issue?
You need a motion to send this to civil service, or do you need that, or?
No, I don't think so.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry, Alderman Charbonneau.
Well, I don't know if it would be classified as a new issue, so I'll hold off for now.
All right, sir.
I thank you, though, Mayor.
All right. Alderman, maybe?
That was just for the question that I was just asked and answered from Mr. Simpson. But if we're to future issues, I do have a couple of those.
Go right ahead.
Two items. Last year sometime, I don't recall the exact meeting, but this board made an emergency appropriation to spend $5,000 to retrieve some artwork from the former Crestwood Mall, painted by, or not painted, but constructed by Ann Morrow. And I know discussions have been ongoing on how to, what to do with that artwork, whether to sell it, to donate it, to retain it. And I wanted to know if we could get a plan of action and a recommendation by Thanksgiving from staff on either one or more options to be brought before the board, either to sell, to donate to someone like a Lindbergh who has a connection to Charles Lindbergh and Ann Morrow, or do we want to retain it? And if we're retaining it, what would be a suitable home in the city for that artwork? My second item was, I don't have the exact address, I think it's 1120, but there's that property the city owns at, I think, 1120 or somewhere thereabouts off Tahiti, across from one of the two entrances to Spellman Park. And I want to know if staff wants to either bring it to this board, or in staff's discretion could bring that property to the Parks Board for a general discussion of the most suitable use for that property. And maybe even consider a joint parks and beautification meeting. I know there's been some talk of community gardens or beehives. Another thought was, when Spellman Park was renovated, that parking lot was upgraded off of Spellman Avenue that used to have several basketball hoops, and now those have been added to the tennis courts, and you can't play tennis and basketball at the same time. So even though the two uses are both there, only one can occur at a time. And I'm wondering, with that lot just being an empty field adjacent to the park, is that somewhere where we could add some basketball hoops and have both those things available simultaneously at Spellman Park? But those are just my thoughts. But right now the property is sitting idle, and I think that's something I'd like to see the Parks Board look at and get whatever their recommendations are on our capital improvement wish list.
Anything else?
That's all I have.
Okay. Alderman Stetter?
A point of information, I guess, would be appropriate at this point. The beautification committee did talk about that parcel that's adjacent to Spellman Park, and Mr. Gillum has been looking into some possibilities. One of the things that we talked about is community garden. The problem that we have is there's no easy way to get water to that space. So one of those other items may be more appropriate, but there are sewer and water, there's sewer lines that run under it, and a few other things that might make it difficult to pave. It would certainly bear some discussion, but we might want to schedule that after Mr. Gillum was able to come back with dollars on how much it would cost to run water out of that space.
Okay. Yeah, I just don't want to see it sit idle.
I don't either, but it's got some challenges.
Okay.
Is it Alderman Stetter?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. See nothing in some new business. We'll move on to introduction of bills or future issues. Anything there? See none? Next item on the agenda is adjournment. I'll ask for a motion and a second to adjourn. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. All right. Thank you very much.